United States are transitioning from an aerial power to a naval power, fully cementing their status as a pirate state. If they're able to control others' economies, they may not even need to maintain their 800 bases. From a purely business perspective, when corporations find a more efficient way to do the exact same thing and save costs, they always go for it. So why wouldn't that apply in this case? None of these events are coincidences. None of these things happened by accident. They were all carefully planned at the highest levels of government and corporate America. This is the United States of tomorrow. It's a pirate state that is completely out of control and has only one goal in mind: world domination, control of everyone's resources, and the use of piracy, violence, and assassination in order to get its way. The war in Iran is much larger than anyone seems to grasp. True, the United States are being humiliated on the battlefield by Iran, losing not just their F-35s and radars, but their military prestige. But in the background, the United States have quietly been carrying out an armed robbery of the world's oil and gas supply. In the last 3 months alone, the US have hit Russian tankers, refineries, crippled China's oil supply, captured the world's largest oil fields, and kidnapped and assassinated 2 heads of state. We are witnessing the transition of the United States from an empire into a pirate state, and the birth of what I call the Petrogas-Dollar or the LNG dollar. In the past, the United States were very sensitive to oil shocks. Something like the Strait of Hormuz being closed would be a catastrophe because the United States simply couldn't produce enough oil to meet demand. So if oil prices spiked, you would see the dollar crash and everyone run to gold.
This is unreal. Isn't this disgusting? Why doesn't anybody contact the president?
Today, the situation is completely reversed. Oil and gas prices are through the roof, yet the US dollar is surging and gold is suffering its worst crash in 40 years. See, the United States of 2026 is not the United States of 1973. Today, the US is the world's top producer of oil, gas, and refined products, and the world's largest exporter of liquefied natural gas, or LNG. They're completely self-sufficient. The problem is, even if you're the #1 producer, you still need a market to sell to. And if you want a monopoly, you need to kill the competition.
The Russian economy is vulnerable. 80% of Russian exports are in oil, gas, and minerals. You want to depend more on the North American energy platform, the tremendous bounty of oil and gas that we're finding in North America. You want to have pipelines that don't go through Ukraine and Russia.
No one would buy expensive American gas as long as cheap Russian gas existed, so the United States simply killed off the alternative to create a captive market.
There will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
Blowing up the Nord Stream pipelines, the US didn't just hurt Russia, it also turned Europe into a permanent US client. The cheap gas was gone forever, and Europe was now forced to buy American LNG at 10 times the price. This greatly benefited US corporations and helped secure the US dollar for the time being against BRICS, de-dollarization, and the multipolar world, as governments were now forced to get rid of their euros to the point they became more worthless for the first time in 20 years than US dollars. The US had successfully turned its closest ally into an energy colony, bleeding them dry to keep the dollar alive. The US went from supplying just 9% of Europe's energy before Ukraine to being Europe's #1 source of coal, oil, and LNG, not just at Russia's expense, but eating half of Qatar's LNG share in the process. After the United States, Australia, closely followed by Qatar, are the world's largest suppliers of LNG and America's biggest competitors. But the US is now at full export capacity. They can't physically ship enough of their own gas to satisfy the market that they just cleared. The empire realized that they didn't actually need to build more infrastructure to win. They just needed to delete the competition. Again. Just as Washington used the cover of the Ukraine war, sanctions, and the Nord Stream bombings to force Russia out of Europe, they similarly used the cover of the Iran war to finish off Qatar's position as a global LNG player. By forcing Qatar to declare force majeure and then triggering the retaliatory strikes on Ras Laffan, Washington took the world's largest gas field out of the picture, crippling Iran and sidelining Qatar in one fell swoop. There is no doubt the US and Israel provoked this, because they had spent, up until this point, 3 weeks bombing Iran, gauging their responses, and Iran had made it explicitly clear that it was now an eye for an eye.
همانطور که قبلا اخطار داده بودیم بلا فاصله کلیه زیرساخت‌های نفتی، اقتصادی و انرژی متعلق به شرکت‌های نفتی در سراسر منطقه.
This move allowed the United States to hit three birds with one stone. By crippling, even partially, Qatar's LNG capacity, they forced them to cancel their cheap long-term contracts. While the US remains shielded, this sent LNG prices soaring, forcing Europe and Asia to bid on the spot market for US gas at exorbitant prices, and would position the US as seemingly the only reliable supplier of energy in an unstable world. This timing is perfectly in line with the US-Israeli grab of the Levantine Basin. This is one of the largest gas fields in the world, right off the coast of Syria, Palestine, and Lebanon. Its proximity to Europe would allow Washington to keep selling their overpriced LNG by sea, while also replacing piped Russian gas entirely. In that vein, Israel and US company Chevron recently signed a $35 billion gas deal, for which they began laying the groundwork 2 years before the Gaza genocide.
To move away from Russia and diversify to trustworthy suppliers.
As the US began their global energy blitzkrieg in late 2025, they timed everything perfectly. First the Gaza ceasefire in October, then a month later the Board of Peace, and a month after that, the gas deal.
את עסקת הגז הגדולה בתולדות ישראל. היקף העסקה עומד על 112 מיליארד שקלים. העסקה הזאת היא עם חברת שברון האמריקנית, יש לה שותפות ישראליות.
Chevron would handle the gas deals and extraction. Meanwhile, the Board of Peace would serve as the front organization for the takeover. This corporate body was railroaded through the United Nations Security Council to provide the legal cover for Washington's colonial plan. A plan which China and Russia dubiously and inexplicably let pass. A closer examination of Resolution 2803 reveals nothing more than a fleeting mention of, quote, water, electricity, and sewage, unquote. The word energy doesn't appear once in the entire document. Then, out of nowhere, at the first Board of Peace summit, we see an oil and gas rig slapped right on the corporate advertisements of New Gaza. This, coupled with the timing of Israel's gas deal and the fact that only Chevron operate in this area, lead us to the only logical conclusion that they plan on robbing the gas fields in the Gaza Marine. In the meantime, the US plan to topple the Syrian government had finally worked out, so Chevron wasted no time in moving on Syria's oil and gas, laying the groundwork for yet another energy deal in the Levantine Basin just 8 weeks after their takeover of Gaza's resources. This energy takeover in the Levantine Basin was formalized at the very same moment that Chevron were making off with Venezuela's oil on the other side of the planet and with the protection of the US Navy. And it was barely 3 years ago that Israel sent a massive FPSO ship to try and take Lebanon's gas from the Karish field, only retreating to diplomatic talks once the resistance threatened to sink the vessel. Now, controlling Europe and weakening Russia was just the first stage. The real target is China. China is too big and competitive to destroy. The goal is to control it. By cutting off their most vital fuel sources, the United States want to force China to buy American oil and gas. This guarantees the dollar's survival and makes China dependent on Washington. This also makes it more difficult in the long term to fully de-dollarize, and it weakens BRICS, the Belt and Road Initiative, and the idea of a multipolar world. China receives around 1/3 of its oil from Venezuela, Russia, and Iran combined. Beijing considers these countries not just to be sources of oil, but strategic partners. In the last 90 days alone, the United States proceeded to target all three of those lifelines with increasing escalation. First, the United States deployed a fleet to the Caribbean under the pretext of fighting narcotics. They then kidnapped President Maduro and seized Venezuela's oil, the largest oil fields in the world.
Between Venezuela and us, we have 62% of the world's oil.
80% of Venezuela's oil exports used to go to China. This accounted for 4% of China's oil imports, specifically the heavy crude that China's teapot refineries require in order to make the diesel that is used for China's high-tech industries. Russia provides 17% of China's total oil imports. While some of it is piped, most of it reaches China by sea. This includes the heavy medium Urals blend that China's teapot refineries also run on. Despite the extensive pipe network on land, most of this is shipped via Russia's western ports in the Baltic Sea. The US knew that China would immediately look to Russia to replace that oil. So they moved that same fleet to the North Atlantic in order to cut them off. As a matter of fact, during the last months, the United States and their allies began systematically hunting down Russian oil and gas ships, not just in the North Atlantic, but across the entire planet. Particularly after the war in Iran began, we've seen an uptick in Russian tankers and LNG ships being blown up or pirated all the way from the Caribbean to the North Atlantic, to the Mediterranean, to the Black Sea, Baltic Sea. This explains why Donald Trump wants Greenland and Canada so much, and why the Royal Navy deployed a carrier strike group just last month to the Greenland-Iceland-UK corridor.
Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland.
The goal is to target Russian tankers and fuel ships and corner them in the Baltic and the Arctic corridor before they're even able to leave. During the last weeks, we haven't just seen the largest amount of attacks on Russian ships, but also on Russian refineries and export hubs, including Russia's 3 primary Western export hubs and several of their top refineries. As a result, around 40% of Russia's seaborne oil export capacity had been disabled. That's the most severe oil disruption in modern Russian history. While these strikes were officially claimed by Ukraine, they could have only been carried out with US backing, permission, and equipment. The United States are clearly establishing a massive global oil blockade against Russia and China. The reason the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor was precisely because the United States imposed an oil embargo on them. Russia and China are much more powerful than Japan was at the time, so I wouldn't be so quick to dismiss the possibility of this potentially turning into an actual world war if it continues to escalate. Now, Iran export around 60% of the oil they produce, and like Russia and Venezuela, they export most of it to China at a discount. Iran make up around 11% of China's seaborne crude imports. Since President Maduro was kidnapped, China has sought to replace the loss of Venezuelan crude with higher volumes of Russian and Iranian imports, making a reliable, steady supply all the more critical. As Iran control the Strait of Hormuz, these ships shouldn't usually have any problems getting through and would in fact be prioritized as China is a strategic partner. However, the very nature of a war ensures chaos. Iran's experimental toll system, like all infrastructure, is being systematically disrupted by the US-Israeli attack, resulting in a crippling backlog. Moreover, in dealing with a pirate state, the threat level from Washington has reached irrational and unprecedented levels, as evidenced by the assassination of Khamenei and the torpedoing of the Iristina.
Death and destruction from the sky, all day long.
The US are now operating as a pirate state. They needn't even enter the Strait of Hormuz and can simply lie in wait near Diego Garcia or across the Indian Ocean to ambush commercial vessels at will. Ultimately, pricing cargo in UN achieves nothing if the cargo keeps getting sunk by an irrational actor. For the time being, this means that all 3 strategic suppliers of Chinese oil are either out of action, under attack, or threatened by the United States. This is especially critical because the type of crude oil that China normally received from Iran, Russia, and Venezuela was a mix of heavy and medium blends. China's teapot refineries are designed with this kind of oil in mind, as they're able to break down the heavy, thick sludge and turn it into the diesel that powers China's high-tech industries. Russian and Iranian oil are chemically different from Venezuelan crude and easier to refine, but China receives them at such a discount that it actually makes it worth their while to refine them using the teapots. While China can recover in the long term and their energy consumption is diverse, solar and coal alone can't power their industrial base to its absolute potential. Even with massive reserves, these cannot compare in the long run with the impact of having a pirate state attack their 3 most valued energy partners in the span of 90 days. This oil is considered even more valuable when you take into consideration that it is sold to China at a discount, or in the case of Venezuela, as a form of debt repayment. Replacing this specific kind of oil at the same competitive price is practically impossible. This creates a cascade effect of sabotage on China's economy, of which the United States is undoubtedly acutely aware of. To add insult to injury, the US has rerouted this heavy crude to its own Gulf of Mexico refineries, increasing its own profit margin, and then compounding further on its profits by exporting the light shale oil that the United States normally produces at wartime prices to Europe and Asia. Furthermore, the US are now using their control of the world's largest oil fields to threaten Cuba with regime change. Half of Cuba's energy grid was dependent on oil from Venezuela. Immediately after kidnapping Maduro and taking control of the oil, the United States cut Cuba off, plunging its power grid into darkness. This shows that capturing Venezuela's oil wasn't merely about corporate greed, but for strategic geopolitical purposes, as a leverage, as a weapon to use for regime change.
Turns out, but Cuba and us, we are talking. In the meantime, there's an embargo. There's no oil, there's no money, there's no anything.
Taking Cuba, I mean, whether I free it, take it, I think I could do anything I want with it. You want to know the truth?
While the United States allowed a single Russian tanker to reach Cuba and issued a 30-day reprieve for Iranian and Russian oil, these shouldn't be mistaken for signs of de-escalation. They are only meant as pressure valves designed to stabilize the US dollar and global markets just enough in order to prevent a world war while Washington complete the hostile takeover. Following the strikes on the Ras Laffan refinery, the planet lost 20% of its LNG supply, which came from Qatar. Then, by some astronomical stroke of luck, Australia, the planet's second largest LNG supplier, is hit by a cyclone, taking half its hubs offline with shutdowns expected to last several weeks. Whether one buys that story or not, the result is the same. In the span of just 9 days, the United States' two largest competitors were taken off the board, sending LNG prices soaring for Europe and Asia. While Chevron and ExxonMobil take small hits in Qatar and Australia, they make back tenfold what they lost to disruption through the wartime prices exacted by the US. Russia and Iran are both Chinese allies, and they respectively have the largest proven reserves of natural gas on the planet. So you would think that they would be able to perhaps help China out in this situation. Well, the problem is that Iran consumes 94% of the gas it produces, and its ability to provide the remaining 6% was already taken out by the recent strikes. Now, Russia are already running their gas and oil pipelines, so that's Power of Siberia and ESPO respectively, at full capacity. Power of Siberia 2 is still years away from completion, and Russia lack the tanker fleet, Arctic class or otherwise, to help China make up for their losses, whose LNG imports, by the way, fell to an 8-year low during this war. Even if Russia could somehow procure the right vessels, US-backed strikes on Russian energy and tankers are now so frequent and severe that insurance premiums have skyrocketed, almost defeating the entire purpose of buying their oil at a discount. By hunting these ships, the United States are not just dismantling the strategic energy partnerships that these countries have built with each other over the years, but also destroying the very infrastructure that they use to trade with one another, from the ships to the export hubs to the refineries, forcing China to buy that missing oil and gas from the United States, because they're the only option, on the spot market, at exorbitant prices, and here's the final cherry on top, in US dollars. Think about the level of criminality that's going on here. So China has to dump its own yuan to buy the dollars needed to pay the very country that just sabotaged its energy security. They're losing their industrial competitive edge while literally funding the United States' takeover of their own economy. And in a move of incredible timing, the same day that the European Union banned Russian spot gas, that was the day Qatar's LNG supply was taken out. This date was known in advance, and I would have a very difficult time believing that the United States and Chevron were unaware. So in an emergency, like right now, when there's no Qatari LNG, there's no Australian LNG, and prices are through the roof, the European Union, as well as China, have to join a bidding war for US gas. So the United States once again, have thought this through and ensured a cascade or a multi-layered system of gains. They not only benefit by stealing oil and stealing gas and then driving up the prices and forcing their competition to buy from them, they also win because by making energy expensive everywhere else, they deindustrialize Europe and Asia. That means European companies and Asian companies, that includes industrial giants like Mercedes, like Toyota, like Siemens, are moving to the United States just to keep their factories running. This creates a flight of capital and deindustrializes the United States competitors. And once that capital gets to America and is injected in the US economy, very difficult to get it out. So once again, multi-layered gains. By making energy unaffordable everywhere, the US not only guarantee their own energy security, but global energy dominance and the position of the US dollar. This racket goes even further. See, the US operate what is essentially a mobile taxi service for gas. Most of Russia's gas, for example, or Norway's gas is in pipelines. The United States puts its gas on ships, and those ships are in the ocean, they're mobile, and they can turn around mid-journey and change course to whoever is willing to pay the most. As a matter of fact, that's precisely what they're doing right now. It's a maritime extortion network. Even worse, the Maritime Action Plan, which was introduced just last month, forces everyone doing business with the US to switch to US-made ships. That includes the entire fleet of LNG traders, meaning everyone who's exporting LNG from the United States to the rest of the world. And that's a lot of ships, given that the United States now has a dominant share in Europe and will likely corner the rest of the market. It also includes anyone bringing cargo into the United States. For example, the refineries, they bring in crude oil. Around 40% of refined products in the United States are made using crude oil from other countries. So you have the choice of investing in an American naval shipyard and buying a US-made ship, or you get punished and pay the tax. Either way, you're going to pay Uncle Sam something. Finally, Donald Trump announced he'll be offering what is essentially a bodyguard service via the US Navy in order to protect ships at a, quote, very reasonable price, unquote. So this adds the final layer to the monopoly in the form of a protection racket. So all of this gives the United States several revenue streams, making money at every single point of the process and controlling it as well. All of this is part of the Don Roe Doctrine. People have a fundamental misreading of this and think that it's a copy of the Monroe Doctrine. What the United States have in mind is not simply control of the Western Hemisphere. It's about moving to the Western Hemisphere the planet's energy corridor. So to get your oil and gas, you now have to go to the Gulf of Mexico or through Washington rather than the Middle East. So the US accomplished this by using their dominant market position, by killing off the competition, quite literally, and then transplanting the planet's industrial base to their own soil. So as this rat race unfolds, where everyone is scrambling to move their factories to the United States just to keep the lights on, and scrambling to buy the last scraps of gas and oil at 10 times the price, this provokes a massive flight of capital to the United States, deindustrializing and effectively cannibalizing their so-called allies in the Gulf, Europe, Asia, which strengthens the dollar, for the time being, in a last-ditch attempt to save US hegemony. And the final act, the US boards up the exits and uses its navy to harass, disrupt, and pirate as it pleases across the planet. Chaos is the model. For the time being, it appears to be working. The question is for how long? In the past, the petrodollar was too dependent on political events in the Middle East. So by doing this, the United States can control everything without having to rely on bases in the Middle East, whether that's Israel or the Gulf kingdoms or actual US Army bases. So the United States produce the world's oil and gas on their own soil. The rest of it, they simply steal from Venezuela, just next door, or from other countries, and then bring it over and control it via Washington. And then force everyone to do business via Washington and build their ships in the United States. And when it comes to the oil that's left over in the Middle East or that exists elsewhere, the United States realized after Ukraine that they don't need to invade Russia and physically control their oil fields and their gas. All they have to do is keep Russia out of the market in order for them to corner it. That's precisely what they're doing now. By making it inaccessible, it drives up the prices and makes America the only option where you can even buy the gas to begin with. The United States have such a dominant position in natural gas that when they start wars, consumer prices barely even flinch. But that same gas in Europe and Asia rakes in a fortune. When it comes to oil, prices do go up in the US, but far less than they do in Europe and Asia. They have to sell their euros and their yuan in order to buy dollars, in order to buy the oil and gas. So they're not only paying through the nose, but they're weakening their own currencies. Whereas American consumers will be disgruntled at the pump, but the money is still pocketed by US energy giants, meaning it never leaves the US economic circuit. From Wall Street or the empire's point of view, as long as there aren't pitchforks outside, it's a win-win-win situation. ExxonMobil, Chevron, Cheniere, and other US energy giants are raking in their biggest profits in history as we speak. Their share valuations are at all-time highs. They have never had it so good. Although for this war, Chevron's CEO seems to think the oil prices are still a bit too low. I guess they could always do better, can't they? Everywhere you look throughout this hostile takeover, you will find the fingerprints of Chevron. They have a finger in every pie. In the United States, in Australia, in Qatar, in the Levantine Basin, in Cyprus, in Venezuela. As a matter of fact, Chevron ships are the only ones that are allowed to leave Venezuela with their tankers full. But if the CEO is saying oil prices aren't high enough, well, clearly world domination and control of the world's energy supply is not everything it's cracked up to be. So next time you're paying double at the pump, spare a thought or even a prayer for the CEO of Chevron, whose life must be so difficult right now. The strategy is very simple. Produce so much gas and oil that you are self-reliant and have it in abundance. Force everyone to buy your energy by blowing up their infrastructure. And if anyone else tries to sell their own oil and gas, you just steal it in transit or disable their refineries or blow out their industry. So this makes you de facto the only option, giving you a total monopoly. In 1944, Bretton Woods established the current global capitalist financial order. The US dollar was pegged to gold until the 1970s, at which point it was then removed and unofficially pegged to Gulf oil, creating the petrodollar. Today, we're witnessing another revolution where the United States is decoupling from Gulf oil and pegging the dollar to its own domestic gas and oil production, as well as the reserves that it's stolen, of course, creating the Petrogas-Dollar. This is far stronger because Europe's survival depends on having the dollar now in order to keep the lights on. And it looks like Asia's will too very soon.
It's incredible. We have such great, we're number one in oil by double now. We drill, baby, drill. We're double any other nation. And it's going to be soon triple any other nation. And that doesn't include Venezuela, who's been great. By the way, the relationship with Venezuela has been fantastic. Millions, literally millions of barrels of oil are being taken out.
So when BRICS countries wanted to de-dollarize during the last years, the United States realized that they needed a way to save the dollar. After Ukraine, the sanctions and Nord Stream bombings pushed Russia to sell their oil and gas to Asia, which they priced in rubles. And after 2022, Russia, Iran, China, Venezuela all adopted new alternatives to SWIFT, such as SIPS, SPFS, and CPAM, as well as new payment systems like Mir and Shitab. Now, Iran are charging a toll for safe passage through Hormuz and even pricing it in yuan. They're also talking about nationalizing the Strait of Hormuz, just as Egypt did with the Suez Canal. These are all the right moves, geopolitically speaking. The problem is that for this to work, trade has to be physically possible. And if the United States are sinking or pirating the ships while they're in transit or attacking the refineries at the source in Russia or Iran, you can't de-dollarize. As a matter of fact, it'll probably make the dollar stronger because the shortage forces you to go and buy the missing oil and gas that you lost at sea from the United States in dollars. As a matter of fact, that's the whole point. That's the whole idea.
We are punching them while they're down, which is exactly how it should be.
So if BRICS countries and the Global South can't trade with each other, then they can't develop the Belt and Road Initiative either. By toppling governments in the Global South and keeping the region in a constant state of war, the United States ensure long-term damage and stagnated economic growth. Meanwhile, of course, the US industrial base remains untouched. Ousting Bashar al-Assad, for example, and destroying Syria's ports at Latakia and Tartus, in addition to infrastructure in Lebanon and Palestine, is what gave the United States and Israel control over the Levantine gas field. And it also ensures that the Silk Road, the new Silk Road, is never completed. Now, the Iraqi resistance, they've already succeeded in kicking out the NATO occupation after more than 2 decades. And this is important because Iraq's railway connects Iran and China to Syria and the Mediterranean Sea. This is precisely why Iran's systematic dismantling of the US occupation bases in the region is so critical, but it won't be enough. If the United States is indeed moving to a more maritime or pirate-based model of raids and naval blockades and remote control chaos,
death and destruction from the sky all day long,
instead of land-based occupation, then the bases are no longer that relevant and the strategy has to shift. The US Navy are still parked outside of Venezuela and widening the global blockade. So what guarantee does anyone have that the US won't position another carrier strike group in the Indian Ocean and do the exact same thing? They say they want to take Karg Island, but they could also just set up near Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean and then sink any of the oil tankers or any of the commercial ships transiting past the Strait of Hormuz. And again, all the United States has to do from their perspective is deprive Iran and the global south of being able to trade with each other and actually get oil from point A to point B. And then they will be well off.
We'll be hanging around. We're not going anywhere. We're going to make sure Iran complies with this ceasefire and then ultimately comes to the table and makes a deal. So we'll stay put, stay ready, stay vigilant, as the chairman laid out. Our troops are prepared to defend, prepared to go on offense, prepared to restart at a moment's notice.
Purely from a game theory perspective, Iran, Russia, and China need to make US piracy and US blockades so costly and painful that they leave. Alternatively, by doing the exact same thing the US is doing to Iran's industrial base, crippling their tankers, their refineries, etc., Iran can make the whole plan unfeasible. During the opening weeks of this war, Iran have been punching 10 times above their weight, taking on the US and Israel simultaneously. No one can doubt any longer the effectiveness of their drones, their ballistic missiles, their air defenses. They've been systematically degrading the crown jewels of the US Air Force, from their F-35s to their A-10s to Black Hawks to Reapers. As I've covered in my investigations, Iran have systematically neutralized billion-dollar radar arrays across US bases in the region at a fraction of the cost. Washington's claim that their largest warship, the USS Gerald R. Ford, had to flee the theater of war all the way to Crete because of a laundry room fire that destroyed 600 bunks and went on for 30 hours is perhaps the biggest admission and all the confirmation we need that Iran successfully struck the flagship of the US Navy. We're reminded of how the Lebanese resistance shocked the world in 2006 by striking the flagship of the Israeli Navy. And they too have proven themselves on the battlefield today to be stronger than ever before. So while the final outcome still remains to be seen, these tactical victories have shattered the myth of US invincibility. And it stands to reason that if Iran can successfully take on the US Air Force and all their radars and bases in the region, then surely they can take on their Navy as well. And if Washington attempt to set up any pirate blockade the same way they did in Venezuela or in the Arctic, then they're not very likely to fare so well. The strategic value of this plan for the US empire is simply critical. It trumps all potential costs. Even being humiliated by Iran on the battlefield, or losing hundreds of thousands of troops, or having a disgruntled population is all worth the cost for Wall Street. The United States are transitioning from an aerial power to a naval power, fully cementing their status as a pirate state. If they're able to control others' economies, they may not even need to maintain their 800 bases. From a purely business perspective, when corporations find a more efficient way to do the exact same thing and save costs, they always go for it. So why wouldn't that apply in this case? None of these events are coincidences. None of these things happened by accident. They were all carefully planned at the highest levels of government and corporate America. This is the United States of tomorrow. It's a pirate state that is completely out of control and has only one goal in mind: world domination, control of everyone's resources, and the use of piracy, violence, and assassination in order to get its way.
United States bomb a girls' elementary school in southern Iran on the first day of the war and kill 175 people?
In my opinion, based on what I've seen, that was done by Iran.
Is that true, Mr. Hegseth? It was Iran who did that?
We're certainly investigating.
Still investigating.
But the only side that targets civilians is Iran.
We think it was done. We think it was done by Iran.
Can you give us an idea?
Because they're very inaccurate, as you know, with their munitions. They have no accuracy whatsoever. It was done by Iran.
Can you give us?
So Trump and Hegseth and the White House have been asked multiple times now about the girls' school, primary girls' school in Iran that was bombed, and you should see some of the rhetoric that has been coming out. It's quite astonishing, to be quite frank. Okay, so first of all, they were denying it and saying that, well, it was the Iranians, and then we actually have footage come out showing that it was absolutely a Tomahawk cruise missile. Okay, so I'll show you the video of that. There's a frame where you can specifically see that munition. The Israelis don't have that munition. Iran doesn't have that munition. It's a specific United States armament, and in a way, also I'll just point out that it's in a sick way named after, you know, the name Tomahawk is taken from Native Americans, right? So you can see in the footage here, right there, the Tomahawk cruise missile, okay, that was dropped on this school, killing, I think the death toll is 168 now, right? And that proves without a doubt that the United States did it. And there's also a map that Pete Hegseth and the Pentagon were showing of targets in Iran. The school was on the map, right? Which I think they forgot to delete or you know, remove before putting it on display. And you can just listen to some of the interactions with the press.
Tie right there. You got a tie on.
Yeah. Thank you. Come back to the BBC. Can you give us an update on what the administration knows, what you know now about the reported strike on a girls' school in southern Iran on Saturday?
All I can say is that we're investigating that. We, of course, never target civilian targets, but we're taking a look and investigating that. Red tie in front.
Just on the basis that with the information you would have, your reconnaissance abilities, ability to gather information, I mean, it's several days on now. So is there any clarity on whose munition this was?
We're investigating it. Thank you.
Still investigating. Here they are asked again on a plane on Air Force One.
Did the United States bomb a girls' elementary school in southern Iran on the first day of the war and kill 175 people?
In my opinion, based on what I've seen, that was done by Iran.
Is that true, Mr. Hegseth? It was Iran who did that?
We're certainly investigating.
Still investigating.
But the only side that targets civilians is Iran.
We think it was done. We think it was done by Iran.
Can you give us an idea?
Because they're very inaccurate, as you know, with their munitions. They have no accuracy whatsoever. It was done by Iran.
Can you give us?
I've been sitting here for 2 hours showing you the radar systems. You know, the 132, the TP2. You know, all of those STAD radars taken out with surgical accuracy, clinical accuracy. Do you agree with that statement that Iran has no accuracy? I think they've proven that they certainly have unbelievable accuracy. Not to mention the fact I just showed you the video, and that was a cruise missile, and they don't have that munition. Period. That's American. Why would they bomb their own school?
Iran today accused the U.S. of hitting a desalination plant in Iran, and they said that might open the door to other strikes on infrastructure, non-military.
Allow us to also open the door to other strikes against them. Look,
you respond to that allegation? Did the U.S. hit the desalination?
They are among the most evil people ever on earth. They cut babies' heads off. They chop women in half. What they did, take a look at our...
What is he on about? What is he talking about? This is like great value version of the October 7 propaganda, you know?
October 7th. Take a look at what they've done over the last 47 years. So I know nothing about a desalinization plant other than to say, if they're complaining about a desalinization plant, we complain about the fact that they shouldn't be chopping babies' heads off.
So I can't show you this, but I've seen the photographs of 100 plus. Again, I think it's 186. I'm just not sure how many of those are teachers. I think maybe a dozen, but it's well over 100 dead schoolgirls, and some of them didn't even have. How can I put this? They were unrecognizable. They were so charred that they had to run DNA tests on some of them to identify the children. Or, for example, they used the backpack. There was no body. The parents. So really, if someone's, chopping babies' heads off, it's Trump, right? Not to mention, we've seen them do that. Them meaning the United States and Israel in Gaza, right? They kind of have a track record of chopping, of decapitating people with bombs. So I'm not really sure he's in a position to accuse others. Not to mention the fact that there's just no proof of it. I don't even know. Like it feels almost benign to even address this. It's like, so the gaslighting is incredible. It's like it's not even worth a response. I don't know what to say. It's just. Imagine you're listening to that, and that's one of your family members, like kids at that school, and you hear this, right? I mean, I guess if you drop a bomb on a girls' school, you're also going to be capable of lying about it, right? Like it's kind of adding insult to injury, but it's not beneath you, is it? I don't know what to say. It's just so beyond the pale. And then you hear this kind of stuff from Hegseth.
Flying over Tehran, flying over Iran, flying over their capital, flying over the IRGC, Iranian leaders looking up and seeing only U.S. and Israeli air power every minute of every day until we decide it's over. And Iran will be able to do nothing about it. B-2s, B-52s, B-1s, Predator drones, fighters, controlling the skies, picking targets. Death and destruction from the sky all day long. We're playing for keeps. Our warfighters have maximum authorities granted personally by the president and yours. Flying over Tehran.
Dude, I remember Donald Rumsfeld when he had that job, and even he didn't speak like that. And Donald Rumsfeld is a mass murderer, right? He's Skeletor, right? He's like that demon in Doom with the rocket launchers, right? Like he's a hell demon, and he didn't speak like that. What is it? What is this? I know. I understand, like from a media aspect, why he's trying to play tough, right? Like he's getting up in front of a podium. I think he even used to work in media, but this is criminal behavior. Right, like this is ridiculous. This is even Bush officials didn't speak like this. Even Bush officials, right, didn't speak like this. They certainly acted like it, but even they had like an iota of shame, or shall we say, not shame, but awareness that they couldn't get away with speaking like that. They couldn't give it away, right? They still had to do the whole neoconservative nonsense, and I guess they actually believed in that, even though it's nonsense. That we're genuinely good and they're genuinely bad. Whatever, I don't care what they believed in, but they didn't speak like this, which it's really, I can't believe that this is the standard now, and that I'm inadvertently like almost singing the praises of mass murderers like Donald Rumsfeld. What is going on here? Like, has it really sunken that low? My goodness. Surely you understand what I'm trying to get at, right? I mean, it's not like the rhetoric being nice would make any of this better, but I guess it's the shamelessness of it that is just adding insult to injury, right? I don't know. I think that this is criminal. I'm not saying that like emotionally or personally. No, it's like legally criminal what he's doing. This is Nuremberg trial material. I'm not joking. Like, absolutely, the war itself is the supreme crime. But like, you know, he would be tried for this and found guilty, and they would quote this exact speech. It's legally, it's one of the worst crimes in the world. That was the point and the precedent that Nuremberg set. So, you know, it's not my opinion. I'm telling you this as a matter of fact. Utterly deranged. Utterly deranged. And it's not the only clip I've seen, by the way, like this. There are other ones, right, where he's, you know, putting on an act and everything. I guess it's not an act, is it? You know, when you're literally doing it. But here's the White House also.
Did the United States airstrike a girls' elementary school and kill 175 people?
Not that we know of, Sean, and the Department of War is investigating this matter, and I would just tell you very strongly, the United States of America does not target civilians, unlike the rogue Iranian regime that targets civilians, that kills children, that has killed thousands of their own people in the past several weeks, and uses propaganda quite effectively, and unfortunately many people in this room have fallen for that propaganda. So I would caution you from pointing the finger at the United States of America when it comes to targeting civilians, because that's not something that these armed forces do.
That's just, again, I'm not even going to address it. I mean, come on. Yeah. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. You know, some of the things that happen in Iraq are so bad, I can't even read them to you, because I think, you know, the filter, you all know what I mean. And that's just like one example. You want to talk about Vietnam or Korea? I mean, like Japan, 2 nuclear bombs on civilians? Like, what is the case that we have to make here? God, how insulting. You know, and let's play devil's advocate literally for a second and say it was an accident, for example, hypothetically. Does that make it any better? Like, you know, how are you going off and making a case that you got the greatest weapons and greatest intelligence, and you are equipped and qualified to do this when you make quote unquote mistakes like that? Like, there's no way that you can look at this, whether it was done on purpose or by mistake, and come out with a positive conclusion. So I don't know what's going on here, and unless you can convince me aliens dropped it, you know, we're going to come to the same conclusion, aren't we? This is extraordinary. And you have to keep in mind that some of the arguments I've heard from not these people, because they're refusing to address it, they know they're criminally liable, but something you'll hear on mainstream media is that, well, the school, or the Israelis particularly will say this, school was next to, you know, an IRGC facility. Again, I thought you have precise smart bombs, so I don't know how that's relevant. And if you want to play that game, there are tons of US schools next to US or on US bases, and I'm pretty sure that you know, none of us would agree that you know, none of us would say that those are targets, because they're schools and we're not insane. So what's your argument? You know, even if that's the case, Iran are not the only ones that do that, and it doesn't justify. You know, you have to take into account proportionality. I really can't think of any situation where you know, barbecuing, charring literally 180 school kids and their teachers is a proportionate cost. Like, who are you killing? You know, who is so, or what is so valuable and imminent, this imminent threat? You know, how is it so great that is a justifiable cost? It just, there is no scenario imaginable where you can justify this. It just doesn't add up. It doesn't. And keep in mind, this was during the opening salvo of strikes. Okay? And he was bragging about, the CENTCOM commander was bragging about how this was bigger than shock and awe. And you know, you guys remember the footage of shock and awe during 2003, which is considered, I think, again, it's not my personal opinion. I think I'm speaking for a lot of the planet when I say that those images were considered like the height of, you know, U.S. imperial crimes, right, around the world. People saw them, and any sympathy that people had for the US after 9/11 was just gone after that. So to compare this with that and brag that it's even bigger, what was possibly, you know, so egregious that you had to put it in the target bank and kill all those girls? And besides, if you're confident in your behavior, then just tell us why you dropped the bomb. But they won't even address it. So all of it is criminal. You know, the narrative, the act itself, it's just. And we're just talking about one thing that happened. Like, never mind Khamenei, for example. They murdered his granddaughter and his wife along with him in his home. I mean, there's just no argument for murdering the guy. He's not a military commander. He's a religious figure. And the guy wasn't in battle. He was in his house. You resume civilian status when you go home. Everyone does. You're off base, then you're off duty. Done. It's a war crime. I mean, I don't. And again, proportionality. There's so many issues with it from top to bottom. Right? And I saw in Tehran, when I was there last year, I saw the houses for the nuclear scientists. They killed all of them in residential areas, all of them in their homes with their families, neighbors killed as well. You know, half of them, are, like I said, are scientists. They don't even have military ranks. They're not even in the armed forces. And they're off base. And they're at home. And it's at night. No, it just doesn't work. You can't make the legal argument or even a moral argument. It doesn't exist. So when they say they don't target civilians, I'm telling you firsthand, that's horseshit. I've seen it myself. I saw that. I walked through the rubble. So, you know, they target journalists. I saw a charred ambulance. You know, these are multiple sectors of civil society. You know, scientists, medical workers, journalists, all of them are targeted. So this lie that they don't target civilians, rubbish. You know they're lying, but I'm just substantiating it with firsthand, you know, reporting that it's a lie. And now what they're doing is even, you know, surpassed the 12-day war. Someone who goes on camera and you know, brags about death and destruction from the sky. Okay, that sounds really cool in a movie or in a song, but you know, you're supposedly the defense secretary or now war secretary, and you're trying to tell us you're civilized and the other side is barbaric and you know they're extremists and you're sane, and it's just not looking good for you, man. I mean, you know, I said this on Twitter the other day that if I were in CENTCOM or you know if I were Trump or whatever, I would genuinely get him away from a camera. I really genuinely think that every time Pete Hegseth opens his mouth, he makes the United States more hated around the world. And you could make an argument that that is actually a threat to national security, because then, you know, you're going to have people lashing out. But if I was Trump, I would genuinely shut him up. Like there is no need for him to go in front of a camera and brag about these things. Like, you know, I know that the bigger crime is the crime itself, right? But like, just from a strategic or tactical point of view, if you are on the US side and you want to do effective evil, they're not even smart about it. It's like, they're drunk with arrogance. You know what I mean? Right? It's complete hubris. I suppose it goes hand in hand, doesn't it? Right? Like I said, empires are not always strategic in their crimes and don't have to be necessarily. Evil is evil. It's not always cunning, right? But the contrast with Bush is still shocking, right? I mean, I think many of us still haven't absorbed how serious this war is. And a lot of that is because of the censorship, which is kind of ironic because, you know, I don't know if you'd agree with me, but I felt like Iraq was, maybe it's because the buildup was also a lot longer and started with the anthrax letters and one in October, trying to blame that on, you know, the UN. They tried to go through the UN and then Colin Powell and all of these things, you know, in the UK with the 45 minutes. So maybe, I don't know. This war is definitely bigger, and they're saying it themselves. And we all know that Iran was the final item or target on. It's always been, you know, it's always been about Iran, and all roads lead to Tehran. So I think part of it is due to the censorship. Anyway, that is certainly a an ice cold reminder of dealing with.
Despite having the world's most powerful navy, the United States cannot force the Strait of Hormuz open, which every U.S. military expert knew would be closed if Iran was attacked. This is why the U.S. Navy is miles away, and it is why America's NATO allies are refusing to participate. The Iranians may have suffered the brutal shock and awe of the United States military, but they have been preparing for decades. And as the U.S. is already running low on weapons, Iran has plans for a long-term asymmetrical war, a defensive fight for their very existence. Iran has the moral high ground, and they're holding practically all the cards. By his own admission, Trump expected a quick, decisive victory. He ignored warnings from experts and instead listened to his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes. With a smile on his face, the President of the United States has said that it's fun to kill the Iranians and that they are genetically inferior. By any historical standard, America has never had a president speak in such a manner. It has been confirmed that the United States has murdered almost 200 schoolgirls with Tomahawk missiles fired at an elementary school. Trump said he can live with it, and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said there would be no quarter, no mercy. While ongoing U.S.-Iran nuclear talks were taking place in Geneva, Israel launched major airstrikes against Iran, followed by the U.S. Iran and the U.S. began negotiations again in Geneva early last February, and Iran agreed to degrade its nuclear stockpiles. 2 days after negotiations ended, Trump attacks Iran. Deceptive diplomacy has been used to attack Iran twice in the past year. It would be unreasonable for them to trust anything that the U.S. and Israel have to say. And it only encourages Iran to develop nuclear weapons, which they have yet to do. During the Korean War, the United States targeted the civilian population, killing approximately 20% of them, and destroyed nearly every major city in a scorched earth strategy, which included targeting dams to destroy the agricultural economy. This resulted in North Korea developing their own nuclear deterrent, a predictable outcome to an existential threat. And Trump recently admitted what the whole world already knows, that Israel has their own nuclear weapons. So why on earth would Iran not want to build their own? The U.S. Director of National Intelligence, Joe Kent, just submitted his letter of resignation. He wrote Trump that it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful lobby, and illustrated how, early in this administration, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your America First platform and sowed pro-war sentiments to encourage a war with Iran. This echo chamber was used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States, and that should you strike now, there was a clear path to a swift victory. This was a lie, and is the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war that cost our nation the lives of thousands. He ended his resignation by writing, "I pray that you will reflect upon what we are doing in Iran and who we are doing it for. The time for bold action is now. You can reverse course and chart a new path for our nation, or you can allow us to slip further toward decline and chaos. You hold the cards." On the subject of Israel, the U.S. public discourse has changed dramatically. How this can overcome AIPAC's influence over an Epstein-compromised Congress is yet to be seen. But our founding fathers would certainly argue that a government of criminal child rapists should be abolished rather than allowed to drag the entire world into chaos and war. Trump is not known for being a reasonable man when it comes to humility. And as Alexander Dugin recently wrote, Trump is now totally free. Nothing can destroy his reputation more than it is destroyed already. No publication of Epstein files concerning his alleged criminal actions can make his image worse. Greg Reese reporting. The confidence game, commonly known as the con game, relies upon the exploitation of trust, hope, ego, and emotion, and is one of the oldest and most effective forms of deception known to man. Human beings are not naturally that suspicious. Starting in childhood, most are conditioned to trust and cooperate with one another. And we are hardwired to look for patterns that confirm our beliefs rather than challenge them. We are also more inclined to stick with our decisions even when new contradictory evidence arises. Some people live their entire lives oblivious to this. Some learn to rise above it, and others take advantage of it. According to psychologist Maria Kornikova's landmark study on the subject, there is a choreography that con artists have refined over centuries. The put-up identifies the mark. The play is when an emotional connection is built by mirroring the mark's values and gaining their confidence. The rope, the tail, the convincer, and the breakdown are various levels of getting the mark so emotionally invested that they begin to persuade themselves and rationalize away any doubt that may arise. The touch is the final grift, and the blow-off and fix is when the con artist exits. Rather than deal with the humiliation, the mark rarely reports what happened. The con game often uses fake participants, known as shills, to create the illusion of social proof. If others are participating, it appears more legitimate. People are more likely to join what looks to be the winning team. And most humans are demonstrably fooled over and over again by someone acting in a confident manner with impressive credentials and wearing expensive clothing. Most humans see this as somehow being trustworthy. But you don't have to be stupid to fall for the con. Studies show us that the victims of the con game are often successful and highly educated. The more intelligent the victim, the more complex they can rationalize away the red flags. The most susceptible to falling victim to the con game are those experiencing stress, loneliness, and isolation. Donald Trump's mentor, Roy Cohn, understood this better than most. In 1973, the U.S. Department of Justice sued the Trump Real Estate Organization for violating the Fair Housing Act for racial discrimination across 39 properties. Trump consulted Roy Cohn, who filed a $100 million countersuit against the federal government, asserting the charges were irresponsible and baseless. This countersuit was thrown out, and the Trumps lost, but there was no admission of guilt. Roy Cohn and Trump held a press conference and declared victory, and Trump learned his foundational lesson. You don't have to win in reality if you can win in perception. From 1973 until 1986, Trump and Cohn spoke 15 to 20 times per day, every day. Cohn advised Trump on real estate deals, marriage, and media strategy. The unwritten rules that Roy Cohn helped instill into the character of Donald Trump are 1. Never apologize, never admit wrongdoing. 2. Always counterattack and hit back harder. 3. Use the legal system as a weapon. 4. Manipulate the media. 5. Use fear as both shield and sword. And 6. Build a fortress of loyalty and punish disloyalty absolutely. Cohn's playbook didn't just work on business rivals and judges, it scaled to con millions of people. The mechanics of the confidence game are the same mechanics as the war propaganda we are seeing today. Confident lies that paint Muslims as less than human and deserving of violence. When under stress, the human mind prefers a target to blame over a complex explanation. And so scapegoating not only directs anger towards your desired target, it gives relief to the people because they no longer have to think, which leads people to celebrate cruelties they would otherwise find unthinkable. Mark Twain famously said, "It's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled." Humility is a superpower that many people don't seem to fathom. The MAGA con worked because there are serious systemic problems with the U.S. government. And if you were conned by this, it is not a weakness, but ignoring it is. The most sophisticated people in history have been conned, and the most effective defense against the con is understanding the mechanics of your own mind and emotions. Greg Reese reporting.
I must address Donald Trump's flagrant war of aggression that he conducted over the weekend against Iran. Last Sunday, when I said Donald Trump may take us to war with Iran by this time next Sunday, I didn't know how prophetic I would be. Let me be clear. No U.S. president has a right to take America to war with another nation without a declaration of war from Congress. That means Trump's war with Iran is exactly that. It's Donald Trump's war. Illegally using the U.S. military for his own purposes, or should I say, for Israel's purposes. The man who promised the American people that he would stop America's stupid, that's his word, perpetual regime change wars, lied to us. He knew he was lying when he said it, because he knew that his entire presidential campaign was sponsored by the Epstein/Zionist/billionaire class epitomized by Mossad asset Miriam Adelson. Most U.S. presidents, just as most of the U.S. Congress, are overly influenced and manipulated by the state of Israel, thanks to the Zionist billionaire donors using the Israeli lobby group AIPAC and scores just like it as a conduit of unlimited cash with which to bribe these criminals called politicians. But without a doubt, Donald Trump is far and away the most beholden and the most controlled U.S. president ever. Donald Trump is owned lock, stock, and barrel by Benjamin Netanyahu and the Antichrist Zionists in Tel Aviv. And Trump's unwarranted, unprovoked, and unconstitutional attack against Iran proves it. Iran posed zero threat to the security of the United States. The American people, especially America's evangelicals, need to awaken to the reality that our politicians in Washington do not represent us, the American people. They represent the Zionist government in Israel. Now American blood is being shed and American lives are being lost for the defense, not for the defense of America, but for the fanatical greater Israel ambitions of the atheistic European Zionists in Palestine. This war was never about Iran's nuclear program. Our own intelligence agencies have repeatedly reported for over 30 years that Iran had no nuclear weapons and had no plans on building them. Nuclear weapons violate deep-seated religious convictions within the Shia Muslim faith. I know it's hard for people in America to recognize that. Besides, Donald Trump brazenly told us last June that he had, quote, totally obliterated Iran's nuclear capabilities. This war will not likely end well. Not for the United States, not for Israel, not for the global economy, and not for the prospect of peace. Military targets were not the only targets of U.S. missiles in Iran. 2 elementary girls' schools were incinerated, along with over 100 little grade school girls and their teachers. This means our military campaign is not designed with precision strikes in mind. They are designed to destroy civilian targets as a means of sowing panic and horror among the population with the hope of forcing the populace to insurrect against their government, just as Israel and the U.S. have done in Gaza. It didn't work in Gaza, and it won't work in Iran. When the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, It did not fracture the American population. It solidified it. February 28, 2026 was Iran's Pearl Harbor. Now their political differences are set aside, and the Iranians see only two enemies, Israel and the United States. Oh yes, and the Gulf Arab monarchies that are in bed with the Zionist/Epstein class. Trump lit a war fever that will not soon dissipate. If this war turns into a war of attrition, and I believe it will be a war the U.S. and Israel cannot win, any more than the U.S. and NATO could win a war of attrition against Russia in Ukraine. Iran has hundreds of thousands of state-of-the-art, highly sophisticated missiles, many of them hypersonic. Iran can fight this war for months and perhaps years if it has to. This is the end of Trump's presidency. He will go down in history as one of the most failed presidents, along with Joe Biden, in history. And as uncomfortable as what I'm about to say is, I must say it. All of Trump's insanity could not have happened and would not have happened without the rabid, cult-like support of evangelical Christian Zionists. When the curtain falls on Trump, and it will fall, when that curtain falls, it will also shine the spotlight of shame on the Christian Zionist evangelicals in this country. These blind leaders of the blind in evangelical pulpits will share the disdain and derision of public opinion both here and around the world for decades to come. Early yesterday morning, after learning of Trump's attack on Iran, a pastor friend of mine in Colorado sent me this text. He said, quote, according to the headlines, the U.S. and Israel are striking targets in Iran. We have lost our sovereignty as a nation. We are now under the control of a Christ-hating, Christ-rejecting nation. Thank you, my friend, for reshaping my understanding of Israel. All of us should make a vow now to never again support any political candidate, regardless of party, who accepts any money from AIPAC.
Every Jew will tell you, I grew up in that milieu. The great avatars of modernity, Freud, Jewish, Marx, Jewish, Einstein, Jewish. Every Jew knows that.
All right, so it's not that the Jew runs the media or that he owns all the banks, it's that they're sexually corrupt.
The Jews clearly control the media and the banks, investment banks, not the commercial ones, but the point is, they carry out in those realms the exact same principles that they display in sexuality. They undermine traditional life, and they deracinate society. Deracinate. Tear out the roots. A real people derives its genius from the land, from the sun, from the sea, from the soil, you know? This is how they know themselves. But, like, Jews don't even have soil.
He has Israel.
Yeah. Those aren't Jews.
Of course they're Jews.
Notice the Israelis. It's a fundamentally secular society. They no longer need Judaism because they have soil, because the real Jew is a wanderer. He's a nomad. He's got no roots and no attachments, so he universalizes everything. You can't hammer a nail or plow a field. All he can do is buy and sell and invest capital and manipulate markets, and, you know, it's like all mental. He takes the life of a people that's rooted in soil, and then he turns it into this cosmopolitan culture based on books and numbers and ideas, and, you know, this is his strength. You can take the greatest Jewish minds ever. Marx, Freud, Einstein, what have they given us? Communism, infantile sexuality, and the atom bomb. In the mere 3 centuries, it's taken these people to emerge from the ghettos of Europe. They've ripped us out of a world of order and reason. They've thrown us into a chaos of class warfare, irrational urges, relativity, into a world where now the very existence of matter and meaning is in question. Why? Because it's the deepest impulse of a Jewish soul to pull at the very fabric of life till there's nothing left but a thread. They want nothing but nothingness. Nothingness without end.
Every Jew knows that.
In the depths of geopolitics and modern religion lies a carefully woven agenda, one that disguises spiritual domination under the guise of ethics, education, and global unity. At the heart of this operation is a deceptively simple legal code, the Noahide Laws. While marketed as a universal moral standard, these laws, promoted by the modern Sanhedrin and deeply tied to Chabad Lubavitch mysticism, are part of a much larger framework designed to restructure the world under a singular religious and political authority. On paper, the Noahide laws appear harmless. They prohibit acts like murder, theft, and blasphemy. But in practice, their enforcement hinges entirely on Talmudic interpretation. And here lies the danger. According to traditional rabbinic sources, idolatry is punishable by death, and belief in Jesus as divine is considered idolatry under these definitions.
The right thing. Are you Jewish? Do you want to honor God? That is the godly thing to do. We respect one another.
The godly thing to do is to kill you.
The godly thing is to kill me.
That's right.
Yes?
That's what the Torah says.
The Torah says to kill us.
The Torah says that people who worship idols such as yourself, when there is a Sanhedrin,
to kill us.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what the Torah says.
So we know how the Jewish people feel about Christians, yes? That you discriminate against Christians.
Christians are idol worshippers.
You discriminate against Christians.
The Torah says that Christianity is...
That means anyone who openly professes faith in Christ could theoretically be in violation of this legal framework. More disturbingly, the punishment listed in the 1906 Jewish Encyclopedia is decapitation. This isn't a relic of the past. It's coded into modern medical systems under ICD-9 E978. Which legally categorizes execution by beheading as a form of state-administered punishment. To fully understand this agenda, we must go back and we must study Rabbi Mendel Schneerson, the seventh and most influential leader of the Chabad Lubavitch dynasty. Revered by followers as a tzaddik, or righteous one, and even as a messiah by some.
I live in California. I own the Milky Way restaurant with my dear husband, and I would like to have brachas for all my children and grandchildren and my husband.
Have your name marked?
Yes, I'm Steven Spielberg's mother also. Steven Spielberg, the famous film director, is my son.
Your son?
Yes.
You have his name also?
Yes, and it's all his.
Schneerson was not just a spiritual leader, he was a political force. In 1978, the U.S. Congress, at the urging of Chabad, asked President Jimmy Carter to declare Schneerson's birthday a national holiday. This day, now known as Education and Sharing Day, has been reaffirmed by every U.S. president since. But hidden beneath the symbolic gesture was something far more sinister. Public Law 102-14. Signed by George H.W. Bush. It quietly enshrined the Noahide laws into American law, declaring them the moral foundation of any civilized society. In other words, the U.S. government codified and rooted in Kabbalistic mysticism, a religious code originating in the Talmud. Congressman William Dennemeyer sounded the alarm in the early 1990s, warning that these laws would eventually be enforced with their penalties. Few listened. Donald Trump's public visit to Schneerson's grave was not a mere photo op. In Kabbalah, visiting the tombs of a righteous one is a mystical act, a way to tap into their lingering spiritual power. Kabbalists believe these figures can intercede from beyond the grave, and that their merit can amplify one's prayers to Ein Sof. The infinite source functions more like Lucifer in disguise than a benevolent god. This wasn't just symbolism, it's a ritualistic allegiance to a specific current of esoteric power. And Trump, like many before him, surrounded himself with Shabbat handlers and deeply loyal to Schneerson's mission and vision. The Noahide framework creates a bilateral legal system, one set of laws for Jews and another for non-Jews. In this structure, Jews are bound to follow the 613 mitzvot, derived from the Torah, an intricate comprehensive code covering everything from ritual purity to dietary restrictions. The Kabbalists believe that they have the power and responsibility to summon their Messiah or Mosiah by doing certain works, or tikkun olam, which we have learned as part of the androgyny and extermination agendas. Non-Jews, by contrast, are only expected to follow the 7 Noahide laws. But these are enforced through rabbinic interpretation. This division isn't just religious, it's judicial. It establishes 2 distinct classes under one global moral structure, with rabbis or religious authorities as the ultimate arbiters of what is lawful or punishable. In such a system, equality under the law is replaced by a tiered framework where access to rights and protections can vary depending on your spiritual status. These pieces have been laid out strategically for many years, all in preparation for their Messiah.
בכל העניינים. מה שיתרון לאחרונה נתפסו כמה עניינים. מה שלא יאות, וגם משהו שעדיין משאיר ליבו. אז הייתה משהו במה ידיעתו. הכנראה שהיא מספיק, שהיום כבר כמה שעות בגין ועדיין ליבו.
One law for all, one system, one vision of righteousness. But it will not be by choice. It will be law. And those who reject it, those who cling to beliefs deemed blasphemous or idolatrous, will find themselves outside the protection of that new order. This isn't just the return of an ancient prophecy. It's the fusion of religion, law, and governance under a single dominion, one that most won't recognize until it's already in place.
They never told you it was venom. I didn't know it was venom. I looked it up. What kind of drug is this? Oh, it's a GLP-1 drug. What the hell does GLP-1 drug mean? Never heard that in my life. Holy crap, it comes from the venom of a lizard? I want to ask you, all of you at home, how many of you are convinced that you or your loved ones are overweight and diabetic because you have a Gila monster venom deficiency? And oh my God, God forgot to put enough of that damn Gila monster's venom in your body, and you ran out. Now you're fat and overweight and you're diabetic. So now you need to inject that venom inside your body every week, once a week. This is the insanity you live in. This is the deception you live in. Just because they called it Wegovy and Ozempic and said it was FDA approved, did I go, oh, it must be safe and effective. I don't know why these people's stomachs are being paralyzed and why they say they're going to develop cancer in their thyroid after a year. Really? Go look it up. I didn't know anything about this drug. It didn't even exist when I graduated school. How did I go on platforms like the Diamond and Silk Show the very next week? We bring this up and I'm educating the whole world about this drug. And then everybody's calling me, wanting on their shows to talk about, oh my God, it's another drug made by venom.
Why is it that in the Old Testament there's no mentioning of a son?
Who told you there's no mentioning? Want me to give you a mention? I can give it to you. Here, Proverbs 30, verses 3 and 4. Hold on, my friend.
You're telling me the son is mentioned.
Yes.
The son.
I'm about to read it if you let me.
Yeah. Is mentioned in the Old Testament?
Yes. Proverbs 30, verses 3 and 4. You ready so I can read it?
But don't play no games.
I gave you the verses. Proverbs chapter 30, verses 3 and 4. What games? Let me read it. I'll give you the link to the Hebrew. Here. I neither learn wisdom nor have knowledge of the Kadoshim. Kadoshim is plural of Kadosh, holy ones. I don't have knowledge of the holy ones, meaning these holy ones are beyond my ability to understand. Now watch this. Who has ascended?
Who has gone up to heaven and come down?
Yes.
Whose hands have gathered up the wind?
Go ahead.
Who has wrapped up the waters in a cloak?
Keep going.
Who has established all the ends of the earth? What is his name? And what is the name of his son?
Bam!